Hi, I'm Kevin from Telestream. Today we're going to be doing a workflow overview of Pipeline, Final Cut Server, and Episode Engine. First, I'd like to go through all the different components in the workflow and see how they interact. First is our Pipeline Network Attached Encoder. This is what's going to be taking in our SDI video feeds and encoding them to one of a variety of different formats, including ProRes. And with our new scheduling software, that content is going to be available for either editing or transcoding while it's being captured. Next is our Episode Engine transcoding cluster. This is what we're going to use to transcode all of our content to a variety of different formats, whether it be for mobile or for the web in Windows Media, Flash, or QuickTime, or to professional formats such as MXF or GXF for broadcast. And finally is Final Cut Server. This is what's going to manage all of those live feeds coming in. It's also going to be used later on in our workflow for review and approval, and also to manage all of the publishing of that content out through Episode Engine to the web or to broadcast. So let's see how we set this up. The first thing that we need to do is we need to tell Pipeline when to record, and we're going to use our scheduling software to do that. Now with this, I can create a 24-hour daily recurring schedule with multiple encode events on it that will happen throughout the day. We choose which codec we want the pipeline to encode with, whether it's DV, IMX, or ProRes, which audio channels we want it to use, 2, 4, or 8, and the format that we want to wrap the file in. Now there's a number of different timing sources that we can use with the schedule to tell it when to start and stop, whether it's the computer, the video input, or the pipeline internal clock. We also have a number of notification plugins to do things like notify our Episode Engine cluster so that it can start transcoding the material as it's being ingested, or sending an instant message when a recording starts or stops. We're also developing a new plugin for Final Cut Server to let it know all of the encodes that are going to happen in a day and when they start and stop. Next, we're going to choose the pipeline that we want to encode. We browse the network, we choose the pipeline that we want to attach to this schedule, and then we're pretty much all set and ready to record. Now you can see there's a time indicator there telling us what time it currently is, and we have an event scheduled to record at that time. Now if I double click on this segment, there's a number of different things that I can enter here. The file name, I can edit when I want the file to start and stop. I could also change the color of the event in the UI to make it a little easier to view. There's a number of different metadata labels that I can attach right into this movie for Final Cut Pro or for QuickTime, so that applications like Final Cut Server or Final Cut Pro can automatically extract that metadata upon import. So now all I have to do is set this schedule into record, and it will start recording this segment. Now if we look down the bottom of the document here, you can see where the file is being written to. This happens to be on our XN. So if I browse just through the Finder over to that folder, you'll see that this QuickTime movie has already been laid down there, and I can open it up in QuickTime and play it right away. So if I start playing this, I'll see the video. If I go ahead of the current time, all I'm going to see is gray because that hasn't occurred yet. But this is a fully constructed, fully usable file, both in QuickTime and in Final Cut. Okay, so let's see where we are in the workflow so far. We've got our pipeline encoders. They're encoding our live feed. They're laying it down onto our XN. At this point, Final Cut Server is automatically going to pick up those feeds as soon as they start, ingest them into the system, ingest the metadata, and make it accessible to editors who can bring that into a timeline and immediately start editing with that material, again, as it's being ingested. So let's see how this gets into Final Cut Server. You can see I'm still recording. I'm just going to open up Final Cut Server. We have two smart searches set up here, one that shows all of the pipeline content that's coming in on the system from multiple channels, and then just a smart search that shows all the pipeline content that's coming in the past 2 hours. So here's our clip here. It showed up as soon as we started recording. Now I can just drag this into Final Cut Pro. So I'm just going to launch Final Cut, again bring up Final Cut Server to the front here so I can see it, and I'm just going to drag that into my bin. Now, just like we saw with QuickTime, it's going to be available right away. So if I put this in my timeline, I can start editing with this content, again, while it's being encoded. If I show the whole timeline here, you can see I have quite a long clip. Like I said before, these clips are pre-constructed, so they're already at the duration of the entire segment of the record. If I go to the current timer before, I can see picture. If I go ahead, I just see gray again because it hasn't happened yet. Now, I can perform an edit on this portion of the file where things haven't happened yet, and when picture catches up, it will be there at the edit. Now let's take a look at our workflow diagram again. We've gone into Final Cut Server, we've found all of our live feeds that we need for editing, we've gotten them into Final Cut, we've edited them, again, while it's being ingested. So now we have something that we want to publish. What we need to do is get that back into Final Cut Server where it can then be approved and published out. So we're going to export out another QuickTime movie back into our shared storage where it's going to be picked up by Final Cut Server and added to a new workflow. We'll call it the approvals workflow. From there, another user can find that asset, review it. If it's approved, they can then, right from within Final Cut Server, send it off for publishing through Episode Engine. Episode is automatically going to make that content into a number of different formats, whether it be web formats, broadcast formats, or mobile formats, and publish those out to the places where it needs to go. Alright, so let's take a look at how this gets done in Final Cut. I'm back in my timeline. I'm just going to do a mark in and a mark out on a small section here, and we'll say that this is a highlight that I now want to publish out. I simply have to go to the export menu and export out a QuickTime movie. I'm going to call it, let's say, highlight, and I'm going to save this into this folder on the stand called For Approval, and that has been already configured in Final Cut Server to ingest this material into our approvals workflow. So if we hop on over into Final Cut Server and we go to our Smart Search Review Assets, we can see all the assets that are there that need to be approved. And here's the one we just made. I can open this up in QuickTime Player and play through it. If it's what we need, I can then go into any of our publishing presets that have been defined in Final Cut Server to send that out for transcoding and delivery. And you can see there's some things that are there that are not available in Compressor. These are using Episode Engine. So I'm going to select Windows Media 9. And when I hit Save, Final Cut Server is then going to send that file over to our Episode Engine cluster for encoding. So if I open up the Episode Engine admin app to look at the status, you'll see here in a few moments this job is going to automatically show up. It's going to start encoding it to Windows Media, and as you can see, Episode Engine is quite a fast encoder, and it's already done. Now, of course, this material could be sent to an FTP server or a web server as part of the automation. Thanks for joining me for this workflow overview. We've seen how all of these products can work together to create an automated workflow for ingesting video, editing it, reviewing it, approving it, and publishing it to a variety of different formats from mobile to broadcast. If you'd like any more information on any of the Telestream products you've seen here today, please visit www.telestream.net.